Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen up there. Thumbs up. Good. All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Barrett. I'm with the Safe Community Projects Los Angeles Wildfire Readiness Division and the Regional Fire Safe Council for Los Angeles, MySafe LA. And we're really happy that you could join us tonight. We have, I think, some really useful stuff to share with you, and we're going to give folks an opportunity to actually talk to us as well, which I think is going to be really important as we discuss the critical issue of evacuations and what that can mean for everyone. A little housekeeping to get us started. We use QR codes to share information. There's only a few of them tonight, but if you want something that's on the screen, just aim your phone at the camera, use your camera, and you'll be able to let those folks come in, and you'll be able to get the website or the image or whatever it is, the video, whatever it is that we're going to be sharing with you. So along those lines, just know that we're able to help you that way. If you want wildfire information on an ongoing basis, and by the way, this is an example of a QR code for those of you that may not be familiar, wildfirela.org. And so just aim your phone there and do a click, or just remember the link www.wildfirela.org. So a couple of little things, and it's particularly important today. I spent most of the day in Pasadena at the Board of Forestry event, and it's important to know we're actually all on the same side. We're all trying to help each other, and we're all trying to make our homes and communities safer from wildfire. That doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, but let's try and be civil and supportive of each other and have positive discourse that helps us move forward. Our agenda tonight is pretty simple. A couple of opening remarks from myself. Then we're going to talk about evacuations. I'm going to cover the ready component about what happens as you're getting started. And we have Deputy Chief Jamie Moore from the Los Angeles City Fire Department, who's going to talk about set and go. I would note that CAL FIRE has instituted a brand new initiative in public relations, and it is called Set Go. They've taken the ready part away because they want everyone to make sure that they focus on leaving when they should. I'm also going to have a fairly detailed update from today's Department of Forestry update on Zone Zero that took place in Pasadena, and some comments about what took place yesterday in Ventura County. And we'll talk about what's happening next month. So we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on this stuff really importantly and right up front, so you don't have to wait for us to get through a lot of the typical stuff we do in terms of updates and background. So with that in mind, let's get started, right? Let's talk about evacuations. This is, I think, one of the most commonly asked about topics. In the 18 years we've been doing this, we hear about this all the time. And for our firefighter partners that have been doing this for 25, 30 years, they have heard it throughout their entire careers. People want to know about, where do I go? When do I leave? How do I do this? And this is even true for people who have been evacuated in the past. So what we're trying to do tonight is kind of give you a kind of heads up overview of both ready and then set go. And then also we'll put a poll up so that you guys can share your own impressions about things that you think are important relative to the evacuation process. And I think you'll find the Board of Forestry update to be pretty interesting as well. So we're going to start with ready. One of the most important things about this, and this is kind of gonna have little end caps, beginning and end, is mindset and awareness. Wildfires can spread much faster than you think they can. Getting ready is about being proactive and not reactive. If you wait, then it's probably too late. And I can't tell you, in fact, in this fire, which took place at the end of 2024 in Ventura, Greg Doyle, who's on the call with me tonight, myself, not only the time that we spent there, but Greg there, and we ran into a number of people who did not want to leave and who were confused about where to go. And one of the things that made it so difficult is they weren't really prepared to go. And when you're not prepared to go, and you're told you got to go, and you've got wind blowing at 50, 60 miles an hour, and you can't see what's going on in your street, it makes things pretty complicated. So even people that knew their road structure were actually crawling along at 4 or 5 miles an hour trying to get out from under the smoke because they could not see in front of them. Because why? Because they waited too long. So as you're getting ready, mindset is really, really important. If you smell smoke, if you see smoke, you should already know what you're supposed to do. And that's what we're going to be trying to spend some time with tonight. Home hardening and defensible space. I'm going to go through this quickly because the Board of Forestry event today will deal with a lot of this, but just think about this. Grasses are the most flammable and quickly moving form of combustion flammable material that you'll run into. The second most flammable type of fuel that you'll run into is a home. It's a building, it's a structure. And taking care of your structure to reduce ignitability of the structure is the key to home hardening, no matter what you do. And the older that your home is, the more difficult it will be simply because it wasn't necessarily following the most up-to-date construction methods. Homes that were built after Chapter 7A of the Building Code in California came along are much better prepared to withstand the impact of embers and other kinds of things. And you also need to think about, and this is also something that's often missed, is that there's a difference between a wildfire where the enemy are flying embers and an urban fire where the enemy is radiant heat and direct flame. So your home in an urban fire, in an urban conflagration, is going to burn because of the structure next to it burning, or the structure two structures away from it burning. In a wildfire, you want to make sure that embers can't find their sneaky way into your house and start an ignition that burns your house down or damages your house. So understanding home hardening and defensible space is critical in the ready part. And you don't have to do it in a week or two or three. You can spread it out over what period of time is necessary or that you can afford. The key is to do one thing. When we're talking about home hardening, think about the one thing you could do to get started. And maybe that's just moving toys away from the house and wood piles away from the house and walking around it and taking note of what you can do. And if you're interested in help related to figuring this out, we've just signed a new agreement with Fireside, and our folks have just been going through training all week. So we have a new methodology, and we've been working on this for 5 months. My apologies for how long it's taken to get this new process in place. But if you need a home inspection, you can reach out to us. I'll give you the information at the end of our presentation, and we'll come and at no charge do a wildfire assessment of your property. Another part of Ready that a lot of people don't necessarily think about are emergency go kits and supplies. And one thing that's really useful about this is talking to people that have been evacuated. If you've been evacuated from your home, a great example is my dad and stepmom. They were evacuated from the Palisades fire, and one of the very first things my dad said to me is, "When I get home, you're going to help me build a go bag or a go kit for the house and for the car." And it was important to him because he had 20 minutes to get out of the house, wasn't prepared despite all the access to his son and to the organization we work with, and really felt like he had paid a price for that, particularly when you think about how long you're going to be gone. My dad was out of his house for 4 months. And when he left, he couldn't get back to the house to get some of the vital things he needed for 10 days. So this is a really important thing to be thinking about proactively before you need to set, before you need to go. A plan. We've kind of seen the baseball season winding up. Hockey's about to start. Football has started. The teams that win have a good plan. The teams that don't win, usually, if it's not injuries or things like that, their plan wasn't up to snuff for what they were dealing with. Your family needs to have a plan. You need to understand what's happening. Actually, one of the things we sometimes talk about is that no plan is a plan. Having no plan is a plan to fail. So it's really, really important to create a plan to succeed. And if you're creating a plan, you need to practice that plan. If it's related to evacuations, that doesn't mean going anywhere, but it does mean what are the routes you might take? Do you have all the things you need to leave? And are they in your car? Are your pets in the car? Are your relatives in the car? Did you leave the children in the house? Some people would like to do that, but it's probably a good idea to bring them with you. So make sure that you know what's going to happen. And the other thing is, have your communications figured out as well. If you, for example, get separated for some reason, we're going to evacuate and drive this way, and my kid is with our neighbors and they're driving that way. How do you stay in touch with each other in case you get separated, one reason or another? So, family and household plan is really important. Sort of community connections. I mean, I think anyone that's been around the Palisades fire or the Eaton fire that involved Altadena, they all know about the app Watch Duty. There's another app called Genesis. The city, the county, in fact, most cities and counties in Southern California, except for Ventura County, are using Genesis Protect to manage evacuations and to help people understand the zones in which they live. So knowing your zone, knowing your neighbors, having an app ready that can tell you what's going on. And by the way, if you have Watch Duty, you don't need to get Genesis. Watch Duty will share all of the Genesis reporting with you. It's also important to sign up for Ready LA if you're in Los Angeles. Use Nixle, use other kinds of tools. And if you get 4 or 5 different kinds of messages, that should probably be okay. And it should highlight the urgency of what needs to happen. So stay informed. And by the way, when we talk about a red flag warning, we've talked about this in the past, so forgive me for repeating this, but I think it really bears sharing with you. There's 2 forms of red flag warnings in Southern California. There's the weather-related red flag warning from the National Weather Service. And then there are red flag parking restrictions in the city of Los Angeles, which are enacted for tight, windy roads to keep cars off of them so that fire apparatus can get into those neighborhoods in the event of an incident where they need to get there. Red flag warnings happen fairly often. We've had a number of them just during the last month. But red flag parking warnings are fairly rare. It's important that you know the difference, though, so that when one or the other is called, you know how to respond. This should go without saying, but a lot of people don't do it, and I think it's really important. Practice. So practicing, people go, what does that mean? I mean, I know how to get out of my house, and that's true. But evacuations can actually be a little bit more complicated than you might plan for in advance. So when you run an evacuation, one of the key things to do, use your phone or stopwatch, time it. How long does it take from the time that you say go to your family members to the time when you're all in the car and ready to leave? Evaluate that and maybe say, next time we want to do it 5 minutes faster. You don't need to do this every month. It's not like checking your smoke alarm, but probably twice a year. And my suggestion related to that would be to practice once a year during the day and practice once a year at night. When it's dark outside and maybe there's no power, it's really a different kind of experience than when you're outside and the sun is shining and you can see everything for a long distance. A lot of people aren't aware about how important this is. You do not want to be backing your car out when you're trying to get out of your neighborhood and everyone else is leaving at the same time. So keep at least a half tank of fuel in your car. If you live in the canyons, I would refuel when you get below half a tank. I wouldn't wait till you get down to empty or near empty. Half a tank so that you always have that much fuel so you can always drive at least 50 or 75 miles. An emergency kit, a go kit, like we talked about before, it's good to have one in the car. And face the car towards the street, as I said, because that's what's really going to be helpful when it's time for you to leave. And leaving is not something that we're excited about doing. Our home is precious. And if we feel like we might not come back to it, or when we come back, it might not be there, that's a pretty strong emotional issue. But the more you know about what to do, the more likely you are to be able to do it well. And being ready is not about scrambling, right? It's a seasonal lifestyle habit. We live in wildfire country. More than 1.7 million homes in California are in the wildland urban interface. 17% of all homes in the state are within the wildland urban interface or wildland urban intermix, depending on where you are, but in places where wildfire could affect you. So you want this to be second nature. You want to be able to think about this the way that you think about if there's a little earthquake. Do you drop cover and hold on? Do you just look around? Being prepared and knowing that we're living in an area where we have to be prepared is essential. Let's move on to set go. I'm really happy to be able to let you spend some time with Deputy Chief Jamie Moore. He is very experienced in a long, long line of folks who deal with wildfire. And I think it's a really important thing for us to see. It looks like my share screen just went away for a second. What happened here? Give me just a second. My apologies.
I'm standing by.
Yeah. Yes, sir. What just happened? There we go. All right. Chief Moore, it's all yours.
Fantastic. First off, I'd like to thank everybody who's taken the time out of their busy evenings to be with us here tonight. And I want to thank MySafe LA for your partnership in talking about evacuations. I know this is a sensitive issue for a lot of people. Nobody really likes to evacuate, but I really appreciate the time that you're taking to learn why we evacuate, when we evacuate, and how we should best evacuate to do it safely. So I'd like to begin the presentation with the incident actually starting off and happening. So this is the start of the incident. Your Los Angeles City Fire Department will be responding to the incident. And once we get on scene, we're going to be assessing the situation. The first thing we do is we take command of the incident, and the incident commander makes a decision whether or not they're going to evacuate. This is probably one of the most common questions I get as to when does an incident commander and how does an incident commander decide whether or not to make those evacuation orders. And we base those evacuation orders when fire behavior, the threat to life, the threat to property, and the available resources indicate that remaining in place poses a greater risk to the community that is being threatened than the hazards of actually evacuating. This decision is based on real-time intelligence. We use predictive models and interagency coordination. But please understand that the number one concern that the Los Angeles Fire Department has and any fire department has is saving lives. And that's why we order that evacuation, and we lean towards ordering it early on. Messaging is then sent to dispatch through our Metro Fire Communications via our radios, and that includes what Genesis zone we are actually in, the area to evacuate, and what level to evacuate. The public is notified via the wireless emergency alert system, or often referred to as WEA, or by the media via the emergency alert system, or EAS. But please also listen to emergency broadcasts, because it's likely that a combination of messages are going to come out simultaneously. So if you've signed up for Notify LA and you get these WEA alerts and you get these EAS alerts, those will actually tell you what you need to do. There's 3 levels. We'll have a warning, an order, or occasionally, if required, a shelter in place. Track your evacuation levels via Watch Duty app. the app that David has already mentioned, Watch Duty, provides you the Genesis mapping. It will actually be color coded as to whether or not it's a warning or it's a mandatory evacuation. And then emergency shelters are activated by us reaching out to recreation and parks. Recreation and parks will establish the evacuation areas, and they'll also help us with large animal evacuation sites. So when people are evacuating, and you've already talked about being ready, now we're talking about being set. Have these items loaded up in your vehicle? And oftentimes you'll know people who live in the wildland urban interface because they have a tendency to park with the nose of their vehicle pointed out towards the street. The things you want to have loaded up and ready to go when it's time to be set is your family, the people, pets. Allow extra time for older adults and disabled persons. Have your pre-made go bag already loaded up. Prepare yourself with pictures, anything that's a type of memorabilia that's irreplaceable. Load up your personal computer, your hard drives and disks. That way you have all that valuable information. And then we also like to talk about having your plastics. Have credit cards, ATM cards, your insurance cards, all those, but also if you can, have some cash available to you. Park and load your vehicle, as I said, with the nose out, ready to go, and have the vehicle fully loaded and facing the street. Something to keep in mind when we talk about practicing this, talk about your children before the actual event starts happening. Let them know your expectations. Practice loading your animals up. It is a good practice to let your animals have a feeling, especially if they're not normally used to being in a crate, to experience what it's like in a non-emergency setting to be placed in a crate and then be placed in the back of the vehicle. I'm ready for the next slide, Dave. Okay, it's time to go. It's time to leave. Do not delay. Go as soon as you get the order. Ideally, when you've completed your set process, you should be thinking about leaving right away. You shouldn't necessarily have to wait for somebody to tell you to go. Leave once an evacuation has been upgraded from a warning to an order. But if you can, don't wait at all. Please don't delay and just go. Evacuation routes. Earlier, Dave mentioned know your evacuation routes. And it's just like we talk about even when you're in your workplace, you should have more than one way to go to your workstation or wherever your office is. The same goes for your home. A lot of people use the same routes every single day, and it almost becomes complacent that you know that route's available to you, you're going to take that route. But have a plan in place in which route you use. Recognize that there may be other routes that you have to take. Be on alert for changes because of the evacuation. Depending on where that fire is or wherever we've evacuated in the orders that we've made, it may affect your route. We also work with LAPD to affect the route so that we can have smooth evacuations. And we sometimes close off one way so the fire resources can come up and the vehicles can come out in another direction. Stay calm, think clearly, get away from the incident, have an idea of where you want to go. And these are things that you should discuss prior to ever having to evacuate. It may be a large shopping center. It might be a family member's home. It might be some friend's home. But have a place where you want to go, especially if you're not with your entire family and you're going to meet up someplace. Have a location that's pre-identified where if you have to evacuate, that's where you're going to go, instead of having people come up to the house, meet at the house, and then try to evacuate. And then plan to be gone for multiple days, as Dave said earlier. You should have a bag that's set up to go for multiple days. I always tell people 4 days at minimum, but if you can pack up a bag that, especially if you have certain needs with medications and all that, be ready to go for multiple days beyond the 4-day mark. I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, pace yourself. What does pace mean? It's having a primary, an alternative, a contingency, and an emergency plan. So your primary road or highway that gets you to your house, that's your primary. That's what you're normally used to. If you have a secondary road that is not typical route that you'd follow, that would be considered your alternate route. It's good to practice driving that route so you have a familiarization to it every once in a while. Contingency. If you live in the wildland urban interface areas, you often have fire roads, trails, or other off-beaten paths that might be your contingency. Now realize you've already exhausted your primary plan. You've already exhausted your alternate plan. Now you're going into a contingency plan. And God forbid you have to get into emergency plan, because that's when we have to just shelter in place. If the fire is upon you, seek an immediate shelter, wherever that might be, and protect yourself. Obviously, you want to stay away from the radiant heat, and you want to close the doors, close windows, so that none of those winds can bring ember casts into the structure or whatever you're in. Ready for the next slide. Returning home. This is probably the second most asked question with evacuations. Why does it take so long to get back into your house? People say the fire's done, the fire's gone. We're well past a week past the fire. Why does it take so long? Well, please understand that when we have a fire go through, we have areas that have been impacted by that fire that have to be cleared of all the hazards. Hazards include respiratory contaminants. They include down power lines, down trees, damaged gas lines. We have individuals who actually go out and look down the roads, around your homes, and through your entire neighborhood. You need to wait until the area or the zone is approved before you make it back into your home. Having been the incident commander on the Hearst fire, I can tell you, we worked with MySafe LA. We had pamphlets, we had instructions. As people came back into the community, we educated them on things that they should look out for that we already previously looked out for around their homes. Any burnt objects, any ember casts that got into maybe some wood. They walked around their homes, they looked at their gas lines, and then they felt secure when they were making it back into their homes. Now, please understand, a lot of times when people are so urgent to get back home, one of the reasons we can't put you back in your homes is because the power's gone. We don't want to put you back into a situation where it might be a hazard and we may have to ask for second evacuation. Evacuation lessons learned. Again, you can't plan enough. Thank you again for being on this town hall meeting. Have a family plan. Take the time to visit lafd.org or the MySafe LA website. Pull the personal family plan. CAL FIRE also has a lot of information that's out there on how you can plan for wildfire emergencies. Don't wait to go. Leave early. I know it's a hindrance, but please understand that both the Los Angeles Fire Department, the Los Angeles Police Department have discussed what to do during wildland. We practice it. We do tabletop exercises. We do Genesis drills. And we have discussed exactly what we need to do to protect your properties as you leave. Again, the most important thing is your lives. We can't replace you. And we want to make sure you get out and get out early. Don't take too much with you. Take what you need, but again, be prepared to leave for several days. And then take official routes if necessary when you can. Again, use those primary and those alternate routes, not necessarily what the map drills, what your Google Maps or your Apple Maps, or if you use Waze, because a lot of times the information isn't updated on those apps, and you're going to find yourself in a traffic jam. You're going to find yourself in an area that's already been closed off. Do not ignore your pets, especially large animals. Again, if you haven't practiced with your dogs and cats, putting them in kennels, please practice it. If you have the ability to practice with your large animals, I'm the deputy chief of Operations Valley Bureau, so I have a lot of equine in my district. We actually encourage them to practice loading their horses. Some people have llamas. We actually practice loading them up well before it's ever fire season, so that their animals are used to it. And then communicate your plan to your whole family and your extended family. Just like an earthquake, people should have an idea of how to get a hold of you, and you should have a checkpoint as to who you should get a hold of, so that person can actually act as a messenger to make sure everybody's safe, everybody's in the clear. And I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, I'm ready for any questions that you might have in regards to the set go process.
What we'd like everyone to do, if you have a question, is raise your hand and we'll call you by the name on your screen, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question of either myself or of Chief Moore. And we'll have another segment that follows that has community engagement. So if anyone has a question, we would love to hear from you now. So while people are thinking about this, I
I,
want to
I
open
have a
this.
question. Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. Is
Yeah.
that, I
Maybe
see two hands up, Jim Van Duren and Saul. So let's start with Saul.
I live on Mandeville Canyon, and that's the only way out is to go down to Sunset Boulevard. What's the LAPD going to do as far as traffic control where the streets intersect?
So one of the things that we've discussed and planned to do is control the intersections. If whenever we have an evacuation in that area, we're going to be able to control the intersections and be able to move people out of Mandeville Canyon and get them out onto the main streets so they can leave. What helps is when people know where they're. In other words, if you have no idea and you have never planned this out, you're going to see people stop at the intersection wondering which way do we go. And so we're going to do everything we can to keep that traffic flowing and moving out onto the main drives so we can get them going. And that's why when we do have, and I know Dave Barrett talked about this, the difference between red flags and red flag no parking restrictions. So I think it's really important when you hear on the news that there's red flag warnings in Los Angeles, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be impacting your neighborhood in Los Angeles. So my bureau actually takes the weather every single day, and we monitor the weather for wind speeds, relative humidity, and temperatures. And then whenever it calls for a red flag alert within the city of Los Angeles, we enact red flag no parking restrictions. And that's why those streets get wider, which allows everybody to come out of the Mandeville Canyon or some of our other areas like Latuna Canyon, Laurel Canyon, Kirkwood Bowl, Franklin Canyon, all those areas. It allows them to get out and allows us to be able to make our way up.
Because I remember what happened at Palisades Drive and Sunset, where there was just chaos.
Yeah, that evacuation is still under investigation, but they're looking into what happened at those intersections to cause that chaos.
One of the things that I would add that's really important relates to the idea of leaving early. The earlier that you leave, the less there's going to be an opportunity for you to run into lots of other people leaving at the same time. And it's, I have photographs from Sunset Boulevard at about 2 in the afternoon, and you can see the loom up of smoke, the header of smoke from the Highlands. And on Sunset Boulevard, people are still shopping. So it's really, really important to think about how proactive you can be about that. All right, let's move on. Let's go to Jim, and then after that, we'll go to Susan.
Okay, I live on Beechwood Canyon. We saw with the Runyon fire during Pacific Palisades and the other fire were going that Franklin and that whole area totally bottled up. We only have one way out. But my question is that up here there's an entrance to Griffith Park that that is always locked, which is a good thing, but it's a backup way to get out. How do we go about, or two things. One, is there a way we can contact Rec and Parks to set it up as an emergency backup, the A of PACE, or do we just take our bolt cutters, cut the lock, and bail out that way? Because we know we're not going to be able to get down Beechwood, Franklin, and get out. It jams now just with regular tourist traffic and normal people. But in a fire, there'll be no way we can get out. We're totally trapped. The back roads are too curvy and narrow, and we'll jam up very fast. So my question: what are the protocols about contacting city agencies where you might have to literally break in to the area to get out and evacuate?
Thank you, Jim. Chief?
So, Mr. Van Duzen, I appreciate your question and understand that at the point where you're at, when you need to use the park to get out, we've already passed our primary alternate. Now we're using contingency or ultimately going into our emergency plan. Now, the Los Angeles Fire Department coordinates everything with the Los Angeles Police Department. So when we call for an evacuation, we don't just sit at the bottom of the hill and wait for everybody to come out. We actually integrate the Los Angeles Police Department into the community. So if it was to the point where we needed an emergency plan like that, they would be opening up those gates to be able to help you escape the fire. At that point, it might even be something where we have you shelter in place. So that's why it's so important. And I cannot emphasize this enough to get early. You need to get out early and then monitor those apps, monitor the radios so that you have an update as to what's happening with that fire and trust that we're going to be able to put that fire out before it gets to the canyon where you're at on Beechwood.
I appreciate that. Would you have to realize that before we got permit parking up here, because the tourist traffic is so heavy and it's narrow roads, that getting up the roads were so jammed you couldn't get up, which is why we put in permit parking and the city council office got involved because they got trapped in it and they couldn't get out. So I'm not so sure that you guys are going to be able to get up here as everyone's trying to get out. So again, my question's on the protocols. If you can't get up here to open the gates, is there a protocol to let Rec and Parks know ahead of time we're going to have to cut the locks, or is there something else we should be doing that we're missing?
Well, that's the thing is if Rec and Parks has the ability to open those gates, we have the ability to open those gates.
Yeah, but you got to get to them, and they may not be able to get up here to unlock them because you can't get up here because of everything's jammed.
So a couple things to quickly add to that, Jim, and we both appreciate your question. Rec and Parks has their own emergency managers within the organization, and park rangers are trained in firefighting as well as in park management and law enforcement. They're kind of a do-it-all kind of a group of individuals who are well aware of some of the roadblocks and things. So they're going to move as quickly as they can. But you've touched on something that's really important and will be a separate discussion in the next couple of months, which is infrastructure. You're dealing with a part of the city that has old infrastructure, roads that were not built for today's vehicles and houses and so on. And that's a big concern for everyone. And we want to make sure that we look at that. So our organization is studying that. We're talking to cities planning, to the fire department, to other folks to make sure that we kind of learn about what's going on. Because I think the point here is evacuation protocol, to use the term that you referenced, is kind of an umbrella over everything. But the actual tactics, the execution of an evacuation will vary depending on where you are. If you're up in the North Hills area, the streets are wider. There are more options available. If you're in Mount Washington or Mount Olympus or Coldwater Canyon, you have fewer choices. If you're in Mandeville Canyon, you've got even fewer choices. So we want to be able to try and help with people understanding what the infrastructure limitations are. And we're working on that, and we'll be able to share more in the next couple of months. Let's go to Susan. Susan, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, hi. I thank you. This is very valuable. I'm in Nichols Canyon up near Mulholland, and this was the first time in 40 years that I had to evacuate. It was very scary. So my question is, the go bag, I have all these personal memorabilia. When do I pack that? I mean, do I have something in my car all the time? I mean, when do I pack the personal stuff that it's in the house that I can't just keep it in a bag? You know what I'm saying?
Susan, thank you for your question. And I totally understand what you're asking. So something that we all have to remember is this. When we have fire weather, understand that you live in a fire prone area. And we have many of those in the city of Los Angeles. When we start having low relative humidity, high temperatures, it's been dry, and those fires start, that's when you should have already been thinking, hey, we have a potential for a fire today. I kind of want to have an idea of what I'm going to take with me. So you want to have pre-planned all that, and maybe you move those boxes a little closer so that if a fire does break out, it's really easy to have that set portion done. And that's when you should do it. Is before the fire ever starts coming towards you, be prepared and have a practice. Have an idea of what you're going to take with you, have an idea how you're going to pack it, put it in your car. The thing is, you can't practice this enough. You should have an idea of where you want to go and what you're going to take with you. And that's when we start having that fire weather, that's when everybody, whoever's on this call, that's why you're on this call, you should be thinking about what you can do to prepare.
I have a different question also. Can you tell us the name and contact info on that free evaluation wildfire assessment?
Yeah,
Where do we call for?
we will,
I think that
we'll share
they
that
make
in a little bit. We'll share that in a little bit. Um, I can give you a phone number right now, 213-634-0100, but we'll have a QR code and some additional information for you once we get through this.
All right, thanks.
One other thing you guys should note is that we've just launched a poll about evacuations. Hopefully you guys can see it. Feel free to fill it out and tell us what you're thinking and what your interests are so that we can kind of make sure that as we manage this moving forward, that we can be more helpful to you. One other thing that I would mention once we get through questions here, if people have evacuated and you want to share your experience, we'd like to hear from you as well. So right now, let's go to Lieve Jensen.
Hi, thank you so much for having this. It's been super helpful. I have two things. I don't know how to check my gas line. Is there anywhere online where we can see how to do that? And my second question is, I had to evacuate and my parents were here and we're from Belgium. And my dad said to turn off the electricity so that if the fire came to the house, it helps minimize sort of the fire risk. Is that something you recommend? Turn off your gas and your electricity before you evacuate?
So when it's the best thing to do for the gas meter, and you can YouTube it, how do you turn off the gas at your gas meter, is to walk around your house, identify where your gas meter is, and everybody should do this. Identify where your gas meter is and identify where your utilities are, basically your water, gas, and electricity. You should have an idea of where all three of those items are. So for your gas, it's simply turning the valve so it crosses. And if you look at YouTube, it'll show you exactly how to shut your gas line off. And you just need to use a crescent wrench to do that. To shut off your water, same thing. You just turn the water line so it crisscrosses the water, and that'll shut your water off. And then to shut your power off, what you want to remember to do is shut down the individual breakers and then shut down the main breaker. Is it necessary to shut your gas and your electricity off in the event of an evacuation? No, it's not. It is not necessary. You don't need to do that, because if you did do that, you'd have to come back. And then in order to turn your gas back on, you're going to have to do all your pilot lights. You're going to have to call the gas company and turn your gas back on. So I would not recommend shutting all of your utilities off. And if your house was on fire, that's one of the things that the Los Angeles Fire Department does, is we shut all the utilities off as we combat the fire.
Okay. Thank you. Very useful.
You're very welcome.
Sarah Jane, what's your question tonight?
Hi, thank you for doing this presentation. It's my understanding that in 2019, the state legislature passed a law that evacuation routes have to be put together, and in putting them together, you have to consider capacity, and then they're supposed to be publicized. And I also live in Beechwood Canyon, and right now our streets are totally congested. There's no way you can't even get through, much less an emergency. Every parked car prevents two-way traffic. And all you need is, we have, over 1,000 cars of tourists daily here. And all you need is one confused tourist that every car behind them is stopped. And I want to know that why is all this tourism allowed up here when it's patently unsafe? We cannot evacuate. They'll die, we'll die. It's just a given, and everybody knows it. We also have a formal fire report done that said that we don't have this infrastructure, and yet the city keeps ignoring it. And you're not you, but LAFD, LAPD, they're our public servants. And when are they going to put safety first? I mean, tourism shouldn't be put first. It's public safety for them and for us.
Well, it's a very good point that you're making, and I'll actually jump in here ahead of the chief to let you know that the process of planning for evacuations is something that involves a multitude of entities, including the Emergency Management Department and the Planning Division of the City of Los Angeles. The bill that you're referring to related to evacuations, Assembly Bill 747, it's not designed to publish evacuation routes for every street and every possible scenario. It's for major thoroughfares. So it's related to Hollywood Boulevard and to Ventura Boulevard and to Sunset Boulevard and so on. The issues that you've raised in the Hollywood Hills are what keep me up at night. And I'm sure it keeps a lot of people that live in the canyons there up at night. It is not a good situation, but nobody's ignoring it. It's complicated. And you live in an area that you've decided to live in, which is great, but you live in an area where the infrastructure is ancient. So I would let you know that the LAFD, your city council offices, planning, emergency management, and organizations like MySafe LA are spending a lot of time and effort discussing the options and plans that can be implemented realistically. It doesn't make any sense to tell you it'll take you 20 minutes to get out if that's not the case. And one of the challenges is how do you give information that people can rely on? So this is a work in progress, and it's not going to happen this week or next week. It's going to take some time, but we are all working on it. Chief, you want to add anything to that?
Well, Sarah Jane, I couldn't have answered your question any better than Dave did. The one thing, if there's a takeaway from this evening, is when it's time to go, go early. Again, you live in a fire-prone community. Yours just happens to not only have horrible infrastructure with regards to the width of the streets, but you have on top of that the tourism of everybody looking to see the Hollywood sign and all these tourists that are standing in the middle of the street and double parking their vehicles. So the most important thing, and this is something we see time and time again, is people will get out of their house, even if they've already done they've done the set, but they'll sit out on their driveways and they'll watch the smoke. They'll watch what's happening. That's time to go. That is time for everybody to start without any panic, without any urgency, to get on the road and start leaving and get out of that community.
Well, also, David, when you said that when people move here, they know about it. I've lived up here almost 50 years, and there was no tourism. It's really only been this way in the past 10 years or so with the internet and guiding people here. People came to Los Angeles for decades and didn't feel they had to see the Hollywood sign or their life or their visit would be incomplete. So it's not a necessity. It hasn't been for decades, and public safety should come first.
So one thing that I can add, and then we'll move on, is if a fire occurs in an area like where you live, Sarah Jane, it's very likely that evacuation planning will happen faster than it might ordinarily. So the idea of issuing evacuation warnings and then turning them into orders is probably going to be something that the incident commander or the unified command team is going to make a determination about as early as possible to ensure that the things you're worried about aren't going to work. I know that Rec and Parks has a plan in place to get tourists and people on foot out. You've got a number of canyons like Runyon Canyon, which is full of people on foot. Pedestrians are at extreme risk, whether you live there or not, because they're on foot and fire can move faster than people can run. So the overall issue of the canyons and these old streets and so on make things pretty complicated. So we're working on it. We're just there's nothing else you could tell us that we don't know already.
Well,
already know, and there's
quickly
nothing.
add, do you know about the DWP project that's been going on? So even right now, that's been going on for months during high fire season. We don't even have an evacuation route out. There's a flagman there, and there's only one narrow way to go up and down that's being shared. And this is in high fire area, and they still have tourists coming up. I mean, you'd think at least during this project, when there's really limited access to our main way out, that there would be no tourists. I mean, it's like nothing cancels them. It can't be worse than it is right now.
No, Sarah Jane, we know that. We're not the people who can fix it. So we hear you. We'll pass the word on. Jacqueline.
Thank you.
We can hear you, Jacqueline. Well, unmute yourself. We could, and now we can't.
There.
There you
Hi.
go. Hi.
I live in Bundy Canyon. We have a major problem here. It's called Mount St. Mary's School above us. How are we to get out when there's all these students trying to get out? Plus, Norman Place we're unable to get out on an ordinary day because there's parking on a very small, windy road on both sides of the street.
Chief, are you good with that? I know what's going on there if you don't.
I mean, I do, but go ahead.
Okay.
My understanding is Mount St. Mary's is meant to shelter in place. How can you force students to shelter in place? Because if I was a student and I was up there and I was told to stay put, I'd just run out, which is exactly what they did in 2019, as you well know.
Mm-hmm. So there is a
And
new.
by the way, why? As another question of interest, how come they weren't cited for having fire alarms that weren't working?
We're not the people to answer that question, but I would suggest you reach out to your council person with that specific question because
Okay.
it merits a response, and I'm sure you'll get one.
Thank you.
As it relates to the college, there's a new agreement between the LA City Fire Department, the college, and the Brentwood Homeowners Association, which are
Right.
all entwined together. And the college must plan for and execute an evacuation drill once a year for their students. It's part of the planning part of evacuation that Chief Moore talked about with set and go. That way, the students are familiar with what's happening. In 2019, they were not familiar with what was happening. And so it was frightening and they panicked, and you had kids in their night clothes running down the
Yes.
street.
Yes, you did.
That is not likely to happen the same way. I don't run the college and I haven't been there personally in a couple of months, but they are pretty aware of the risk and liability issues if they're not prepared. So it is kind of a new era in terms of being prepared for wildfire. We'll look into it and we'll give you an update in our October meeting.
Thank you. Because, when I can see students, which is quite often because I'm always walking the neighborhood, and I say to them, do you know you live in a high hazard fire zone? They look at me as though I'm mad. So the truth is the college may well know, but what about the students? And really, is once a year good enough? I don't think so.
Yeah, so as I said, we will look into this a little bit further and we will have an update for
Thank
you
you.
in our next meeting.
Thank you.
Alora, what's your question?
Hi, this is just a quick question. I live in the Hollywood Dell, and at first a comment. Yeah, when I saw the Runyon fire from my living room, I just grabbed my cat and I'm like, I got to get out of here. And I did have some bags ready, but I realized that, I didn't take some of the things that I needed, but I'm going to check the list. But this is just a separate question that I was always curious about. Does the fire department use the Hollywood Reservoir for the fires? I was always wondering about if that water is used or how that works.
So we have helicopter landing sites that we use for our water supplies. There are multiple other resources of water. That's not one of our primary sources of water in the event of an emergency. So we go to our helipads, and that way we can operate safely, fill our helicopters, and be able to get the water where we need it as quickly as possible.
Thank you,
Okay,
Alora.
thanks.
So before we move on, I'd like to just keep this conversation going a little bit. If you have been evacuated at any time in the past and you'd like to share your experience or you have something to say about that, raise your hand as if it's a question, and we will use the hand raising capability of Zoom and we'll call on you so you can share your experience. So Susan Hamer, why don't you start us off and tell us about your experience?
Well, I said I've lived here 40 years, and this was the 41 years, and this is the first time I ever had to evacuate. So I was scared, and I have an in-law who said I could stay with them. I was just like I just remember I was watching the news, and I was packing my bag, watching a movie, actually, a screener, and then then all of a sudden I had my earbuds in. All my friends from all over the city I started packing, going out, and people started just calling me and calling me, get out, get out, get out. And it was so annoying and it was frightening. And I wasn't sure if I'm supposed to lock the door or not. And my neighbors 2 doors away, they never did evacuate. So they said they'd turn off the gas for me if it was a problem. They stayed. And I just drove down Mulholland. There was no traffic. And I turned down, Donna Pergita, that side street, and there was no traffic. But Laurel Canyon, the traffic lights were out. It was very eerie and very scary. And, I got to my friend's house and I was watching the news and it was just frightening. I didn't really have a problem actually getting out of my house, but the fear factor was like overwhelming. I'd never been that afraid in my life, except maybe flying a plane when it was going through turbulence. But it was very frightening and I don't want to go through it again.
Of course not. Of course not. Thank you for sharing that, Susan. Leave.
Welcome.
Want to unmute yourself,
Yeah,
Leave?
sorry, it took a bit.
That's okay.
I want to thank you guys again for everything you've done. I had to be evacuated with my 82-year-old parents, and my mother has a severe heart condition, and she almost hyperventilated. And I told her, please don't have an incident because I can't take you to an emergency room right now. And I had a cat that needed to go in. I did not prepare because I didn't have internet. This is the issue. I think sometimes a lot of my friend internet, we didn't have internet for 4 days, so I had no idea that the fire was literally one canyon over, because you can't use their apps or anything. So my friends called me, and my neighbors, we have a neighborhood app, they all texted me that everybody was leaving, so I literally had 3 minutes to throw something in a bag, and I just told my parents, take your medication, your passports, clean pair of underwear, we have to go, let's go. So I'm definitely going to be more prepared next time. The issue for me was too, I live off Laurel Canyon, which route to take. I didn't know what was best. So I just went down Laurel Canyon. But as the other lady just said, all the lights were out. It was very scary because, and there was a huge amount of cars going down to Sunset. So I went north. I went up to the valley. And then traffic was okay. So it would be helpful to get some kind of route, if there is an evacuation, maybe, I don't know if it's possible, but if an app where you can get a text like this street is clear, or don't go south or go north, or anything even generic would be helpful, if that's possible, so people know what roads are clear, because I didn't want to go in Mulholland. I didn't know if it was open or not.
Miss Jansen, and I appreciate, and I can sympathize with your situation and totally understand the fear you went through with your parents. But I hope after tonight's presentation, you've learned that it's really, really important to leave early. I mean, when you have a fire one canyon over, there's absolutely no reason to be staying in your home. You should.
And I just didn't know because I didn't have the internet.
But what I'm saying is, when you have weather conditions and you have a fire anywhere near that portion of Los Angeles, when your internet goes, or when the radios are telling you that there's a fire that close, it's really important. Remember, we have that primary and that alternate plan. Those are the times you want to leave, before the street lights go out, before the internet goes out. When you're talking about that timeline, we're already into the contingency and emergency plan era. So I hope everybody, please, a lot of the situations you guys have talked about today, you waited way too long. The most important thing I can emphasize tonight is go. Trust that we're going to protect your homes. Trust that the Los Angeles Police Department are going to go in there and protect your houses. We infiltrate all of the neighborhoods with fire engines and police cars. We bring helicopters in to attack these fires. We have boots on the ground that are going to go in there and get these fires knocked out. But we need everyone to leave early so that we don't have these congestion of the streets, so we don't have people that are left behind panicking, and we don't have people who purposely choose to stay behind trying to protect their home, making it difficult for us and making us have to worry about lives that are at stake.
And I understand, but my internet was out for 4 days before I got you know what I mean? So
that's why it's so important
I
to
don't
have
have
an AM radio. An AM radio is vital. If you have not practiced with radios, get an FM AM radio. They have emergency radios as well. I can tell you, I know most of the broadcasters, and they'll be so fast to tell you what's happening, literally as it's occurring, to tell you to get out.
Okay. I can add to that our organization is able to provide you with emergency NOAA radios. They do not require internet connectivity to work. They will turn on by themselves and notify you. And we make them available at all of the wildfire resource events that we do. We have several coming up in the next couple of months. If you take a peek at our Wildfire LA website, once every couple weeks, you'll see when the next one is, show up and you'll get a radio for free. They typically cost about $50, $60. So it's a worthwhile thing for you to do. And as it relates to preparation, one other thing that particularly hearing from Susan and Ms. Jansen, if you have pets, think about how responsive they are. Dogs are usually pretty easy, but cats can be very challenging. So getting your cat familiar with getting into their crate so that you can put them in the car is a really, really important task. And I would highly encourage you guys to do that. Thank you for spending time on this aspect. We're going to move on now to,
I had a question. Are we supposed to leave our doors unlocked when we leave?
yes, you are.
Okay, thanks.
And the reason is simple. It's so firefighters don't have to break the door down and damage it.
Yeah. And you can go either way with that. I tell people, if we need to get in, we know how to get in. A lot of people worry because they leave their doors unlocked. I mean, it's really up to you. We need to get in your house. We're going to get in your house, but please understand, we're not going into people's homes unless we have to.
Right.
Well, it's not you I'm worried about. It's like other people that would come in.
That's why the police department, if you leave your doors unlocked, they're not worried. I mean, we have police officers that go up and down the streets. They patrol the entire time an area is evacuated to make sure that there's no looting that takes place.
And
Thank you.
Are you supposed to leave the lights on?
You don't necessarily have. I mean, we're not looking in your house. We're looking as the fire approaches to keep it away from your homes. That's why defensible space is so important.
Okay, everybody, we're going to talk about something else that would happen today. This is a rapidly put together thing. I know some of the people on this call were at the Board of Forestry meeting in Pasadena as well. I see some of you on the call, and when we get to the end of this, if people want to make comments, we would love to hear from you. I'd remind those of you that haven't looked at the poll that we have to get information from you to please do share your opinions. And even if you do it near the end, we'd love to hear from you so that we can provide you with better service and better information as we move forward. So for those of you that may not be aware, the Board of Forestry was mandated by the governor of California to finalize the parameters for 3074, the Zone 0, Zone 1, Zone 2 legislation that determines how defensible space can be managed. And so in May, I sent a letter to the board, and it was accompanied by hundreds and hundreds of you who added your signature to it, telling them that they should look at Southern California, that they should look at Los Angeles, because it's not the same as Northern California. Many other people sent their own letters making the same request and claim. So the Board of Forestry agreed to come down here for September. And yesterday they were in Ventura with former Deputy Mayor Jeff Gorell, who's now supervisor up there. And today they were in Pasadena. The state fire marshal came. A bunch of people showed up. It was a really interesting event. And as you can see here, well attended. I think it was a very interesting day. Everyone got a chance to share their opinions and their expertise. There was about 100 people who were there in person and more than 200 who were there online. A lot of qualified people, some of the scientists from UCLA, independent researchers, wildfire survivors, lots of people who had something to say and who were very interested in what was going on. The topic today and yesterday was specifically about Zone 0. So here's some of the updates of what's changed as the Zone 0 mandate has kind of been evolved. Zone 0 applies to the 5-foot zone around a home, but now it extends for 5 feet or to the end of the property line, whichever comes first. They also modified Zone 1 to make sure it starts at the 5-foot mark, not at the 0 mark. And defensible space zones also end at the property line. So a lot of people were confused about, well, it says 100 feet for the state, it says 200 feet for the city. what do I do? Your defensible space zone will end at the end of your property. And so that's a very important change that's been made. No landscaping materials that are likely to be ignited by embers, with the exception of potted plants, which you can move. So you have to be able to pick the potted plant up and move it, are permitted within the zone 0 area. This is a clarification on what has been talked about for a while. Trees are permitted if they are maintained. So there can be no dead or dying branches. Lower branches have to be pruned. You don't want to have any branches from the ground up to 6 feet. No branches should be within 5 feet of the roof or the walls of a structure, or 10 feet from a structure's chimney. And single specimen trees, and this is something that might change after the input from today, but live trees that stand along without overlap into the canopy of other trees, which are either protected by a local ordinance or are properly pruned, they are permitted within zone 0. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to necessarily cut down trees that are already in that space. So things that are not permitted, and we need to be very clear, and this actually makes common sense. I don't think anyone is against the idea of these 3 topics. No firewood against your house or within zone 0. No fallen leaves or needles on roofs or in rain gutters. And I can tell you that I've visited with homeowners, particularly in the Hollywood Hills and in Mandeville Canyon, who have said, I'm worried about wildfire and how do I get out, and we need to do things. And their homes are covered with branches and needles and leaves. And they aren't taking the very low-cost steps to protect their homes. The area under decks, balconies, and stairs, they have to be barren. They have to be free of vegetation. And I would also tell you, this is not part of the Zone 0 mandate, but if you can put mesh the way that you would over a vent that protects the underside of a deck or balcony, it's a really good idea to have that extra layer of protection to make sure that embers don't get under a deck, which could then lead to an ignition. And that means that gates and fences must be non-combustible, so that for the 5-foot space from where your structure is out 5 feet, it's got to be non-combustible. After that, you can maintain a wood fence if you like. No new construction combustible fences at all are permitted. So if you're thinking about, and you live in a very high fire severity zone, and you're thinking about replacing a fence in zone 1, and you think that you're going to use a plastic composite, you cannot do that anymore. So they're very, very concerned about new construction and so on. Outbuildings. A lot of people have sheds. It's specific to structures that are smaller than 120 square feet and that they're not intended for human habitation, but they're not permitted anymore within zone 0, right? So you can have them in zone 1 or zone 2, but not in zone 0. A lot of people are asking about accessory dwelling units, the ADUs that are becoming more and more popular. They must comply with zone 0. But a very important change is that if your property line is adjacent to another home and right up against your property line and the other person's property is an ADU, that doesn't trigger zone 0 for you, only for the other property owner. So that's an important distinction about what happened. Here's a quick timeline for you about what's happening before this becomes law and is enforceable. In September, right now, the committee's here and they spent the day learning about what's going on. For the rest of the month and into October, they're going to be considering all the input that they got, and they're going to forward the rule text to the full board of the Board of Forestry. In November, they're going to consider how those changes work, and they're going to vote on how the formal rule process for the end of the year will work. But before they actually make that happen, in November, December, there will be additional public comment and several hearings, at least in November. And then in January, we're hitting the end of the road where folks are going to be able to share exactly what's happening, and we'll see Zone 0 enacted. And how it is enforced remains to be seen. How people will respond to it remains to be seen. I can tell you that today was a very charged day with a lot of personal experience and people who are frightened or who felt that people weren't listening to them. So one of the key factors to understand, which a lot of people may not understand, is the Board of Forestry has been chartered with finalizing the regulations for Zone Zero. In so doing, they cannot consider any action related to home hardening. In our view, that is a gap that creates a lot of problems because people think, oh, Zone Zero solves the problem. But the actual significant problem is with your home. Your home is the second most likely source of fuel. And if you look at pictures, and we have plenty of them from Altadena, from the campfire up north several years ago, from the Palisades, you'll see that trees survive. And a lot of other vegetation survives where homes did not. So the really important aspect is to take whatever steps you can to lower the ignition possibilities of your home. So some of the takeaways from today: well-maintained trees and foliage, protected structures in Pacific Palisades according to the people who live there. And they wanted to make sure that the Board of Forestry heard that loud and clear. There were some folks who were talking about seeing the board in court. I don't personally think that was very helpful, but they were letting everyone know how opposed they were to Zone Zero overall. There was a lot of mention from people about off-gassing dangers and burning capabilities for artificial turf. Artificial turf is more flammable than grass. And we're talking about dichondra or something that is not 8, 10-inch, 12-inch grass that burns quickly. People also talked a lot about urban conflagrations, the chain reaction of radiant heat and direct flame. And it's very, very important to know that both Altadena and the Palisades were not wildfires. So one thing, if you're not certain, clarity here: if your home is impacted by a wildfire, the threat to your structure will be embers. But once a wildfire transitions into an urban fire, the threat to your home is very different, particularly if it's a wind-driven fire. At that point, radiant heat and direct flame impingement are what will put your home at risk. And both Altadena and the Palisades transitioned from a wildfire into an urban fire. In Altadena, the fire started in Eaton Canyon, very strong 50-plus-mile-an-hour winds blowing south. And within 35 minutes, homes were engaged in fire. And it was very difficult to get resources there. But when you think about thousands of homes burning, if you had thousands of fire engines, maybe something could be done, but there's no such thing as thousands of fire engines. So the fire really got out of hand. In the Palisades, it's worth noting that the fire that started in the Highlands, there were some pre-deployed resources from the LAFD, and they were on scene within minutes. And they saved dozens and dozens of homes up in the Highlands. They did a fabulous job, along with both LA County and LA City's air operations teams. But the fire started moving over the crest of the hill towards PCH and towards the main Palisades village. And by the time the late afternoon and early evening came, and well into the next morning, gusts in excess of 80 miles an hour made it so dangerous that you wouldn't have firefighters there because there wasn't much that they could do. So they were waiting for the wind to die down. They were not having a party. They were not standing around not doing things. And there is a series of investigations underway which will help explain what's going on. I can share what I have shared because I'm not part of the city, but I would tell you to be patient because the information that's going to come out is going to help with lessons learned and making things better moving forward. One of the other things that's really important that was discussed today were that local conditions need more local control. It's very important that we allow the LA City Fire Department or the County Fire Department or the Beverly Hills Fire Department or whatever jurisdiction you live in. They know you and your homes and your community better than the Board of Forestry does. And so giving them the opportunity to determine how Zone Zero should work and how your protection process should work is extremely important. And currently, the law says that local jurisdictions can adjust the level of compliance, but it cannot be any less than what the law will specify. And it's important that we push the Board of Forestry, not to make a change specifically, but to engage with all of these fire departments, to learn from them, to engage with more scientists, to engage with more professors, to engage with more fire survivors and residents so that they can have a better understanding of what's going on. I've invited them to tour the Hollywood Hills and Mount Washington. Going into the Altadena area, it's too late. You just have a bunch of cleared lots. They can't really see what happened there. But if we take people into the Hollywood Hills, I can assure you they won't sleep well the night after they have been there. So we want to push them. And if you have public comment to make, go to the Board of Forestry's website. I'm sorry, I didn't think to put a QR code up, but just Google California Board of Forestry. The public comment is right there on their homepage, and tell them what you think. People are also very concerned about drone surveillance from insurance companies to make determinations of their property. I don't think that's a hill that you want to die on, because the drones are essentially looking at the exterior. They're not going into your homes. So it's personally sensitive, and people feel that it's intrusive, but it's not likely to be illegal. So we need to think about those things and think about how we move on. If anyone has anything that they'd like to add relative to their experience with the board today, I saw Frank Shotwell and a couple of other folks. If you want to add anything, raise your hand and we'll give you an opportunity to add to the conversation. Anybody want to jump in?
I thought it was close to 150 people. It felt like a very full room. The energy was high, and it certainly seemed like the board was taking it in and seriously considering what was shared.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I mean, it was really, really important to hear from folks, and hopefully, you know, they're going to take it seriously. Pat, I'm glad to see you. Why don't you share with us your experience from today?
Thank you, David. It was good seeing you there. So I think, you know, messages I took away, hardening is so crucial. And I don't live right in a severity zone, but I do live right next to the Sepulveda Basin. And we're going to be getting rid of the wood fence. That was a lesson I got today. I am terrified of junipers and cypress and palm trees. We saw in the video today what they did, and it appeared that one palm tree ignited multiple houses.
Right.
You know, and I have to thank LAFD for getting rid of multiple palm trees out of the Sepulveda Basin, with many more to go. But I would emphasize every point you made, and super important to give control to our local people who know the area. So I am absolutely on board with a one size doesn't fit all. Our fire people, our fire inspectors know what they're doing.
Thank you, Pat. Really appreciate that. And and the Sepulveda Basin is an area that is very sensitive right now in terms of the actions that need to be taken. There are some actions being taken, and many more need to come into play. But Chief Moore and his team are working on it very diligently, along with homeowners like Pat Bates. So expect to have some good news about that as we move forward. Okay, we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes. I want to make sure that I remind everyone about our podcast, Rebuild LA. It's not just about the Pacific Palisades and Altadena. It's about the whole city, the whole county. It's about the idea of dealing with the challenges of infrastructure, about dealing with the challenges of evacuations and routes and what happens. So some of the recent guests that we've had include a Palisades survivor, Carrie Weaver, Amory Thomas from Altadena. Senator Ben Allen has been very, very supportive in terms of how he has shared what he's trying to work on. I did a two-part series on evacuations most recently. CAL FIRE Chief Frank Bigelow and Cal OES Chief Jay Lopez talked about how to harden your home. And we had the State Fire Marshal talking about the battle for Zone Zero and what that means. So these are just a couple of the more than 40 episodes that we've recorded so far. We've got a new episode every single week. They drop Monday night at just about midnight. So if you're interested in learning more about it, here's a QR code that'll take you directly to Rebuild LA. We think it's a very, very important part of the overall process, and we would encourage you to listen. It's great when you're driving or when you're making dinner to listen into this, and it's available through every podcast streaming source or directly through our web environment. And I would add that this is part of helping us. When we have these guests talk to us, they're sharing vital information. We've had NOAA, we've had NASA. NOAA just introduced today a new application that the LAFD is going to love, which updates fire behavior weather on an hourly basis. And because wildfires change quickly depending on the time of day, whether hillsides are in or out of alignment, having an hourly update on what's happening with wind and other behavior is hugely important. And NOAA has done a really, really good job working with several universities to come up with this new software solution. When we get this information, we're able to turn it around and do things that help the community. We're working right now on some wellness programs, which we'll bring to the Palisades and to Altadena to help kids and older adults feel better about where they live and how to get started again. And we're going to be doing workshops throughout the city, helping people to understand a little bit more about what they can do to feel better about their situation. So keep that in mind and know that we're very, very excited about what we can do over the course of the coming months. I see that Gerardo has his hand up. This is not necessarily a point when we do questions and answers, but I would love to invite you to tell us what you have on your mind.
Yes, I live in Shadow Hills, and I would like to know how can we schedule one of your presentations for our community.
I will put some contact information into the chat, and you can use that to contact us. Do you know how to look at the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
I got it open right now.
So I will add that to the chat in just a moment.
Okay.
And you'll be able to then, in fact, I'll do it right this minute. As you can see on the screen, our next meeting is October the 16th. And we're going to talk about wildfire legislation. What are all the bills, whether they're Senate bills or Assembly bills that relate to wildfire? How does that relate to applying for grants? If you've become a Fire Safe Council working with us, you now have the opportunity to apply for grants. We want to help you understand what grants could be available to you and how you can use them. We'll have a Wildfire Alliance update. I haven't figured out who our specific guest is going to be yet, but we're looking forward to having someone interesting. And remember that in November, we do not have a meeting. So that's because of Thanksgiving, and even though it's late this year, we don't want to take up the third Thursday of the month. So if that's okay with you, it's okay with us. We'll be back for December. And if you need to reach anyone about a presentation, we do them all over the city. We're happy to do that. We have several wildfire fairs coming up, working in different Los Angeles Fire Department bureaus and in the county as well. If you need to reach Chris Neville, who can help you with organizing that stuff, his email is now in the chat, and I'll give you a moment or two to grab that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I want to thank everyone for spending time.
How do we find the free wildfire assessment? Besides the phone number, you said you were going to put something in the chat.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for that. Go to wildfirela.org and to the Ready page, and there's an opportunity for you to make a request for an assessment.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. We'll have some stuff to share independently. If you are not part of our mailing list, go to wildfirela.org, and at the bottom of the page, you can sign up. Then you will get monthly updates. We don't want to give you too much stuff in your email, but we'll give you monthly updates on developments and things that are happening. We're working on some interesting opportunities to share more about evacuations with you, as well as other stuff. So thanks very much for spending 88 minutes with us today. We're glad to have had you, and I hope everyone has a good, safe rest of the week and weekend. And I think all of us need to look forward knowing that there is hope on the horizon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye.